Hey everybody, Dr. Ray here, and what I'm going to talk about is starting an esports program. So consistently, I'm getting asked by K-12 schools or other colleges, how do you start an esports program? This is something that I was asking several years ago as well. So I thought I would put together a little video which would kind of highlight some of the big picture stuff that you want to consider, or how do you do it as you're going about thinking about starting a program. These are all things that I experienced when I put the program together at UNCW, all things that I'm still going through and things that I'm watching others in the industry go through as well. So let's talk about it. Let's get into it. Let's talk about what you need when you're starting an esports program. So first of all, what do you mean when you say you're starting an esports program? Are you talking about an arena, like a big arena, a small arena, a lab? Are you talking about curriculum, like esports curriculum tailored towards various jobs in the field? Are you talking about a club? Are you talking about hiring staff and people and coaches and directors? Are you talking about K-12, like a school, a middle school, a high school? Are you talking about a university, a college, a community college? Let's talk about what you're talking about first, and then let's start to narrow it down. But we're going to get into some of the more specifics and like the high level overview of all the different things that you want to consider and do as you're starting to think about this. Because the first step, what you really need to do is, you literally need to write a plan of how you're going to do this and what your goals are for the university or school, right? You need to have a plan. So let's talk about what needs to be in there. So first of all, I would ask you, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Is it because the students came up to you and want to do this? There's student interest at your school. Like somehow you found out that there's student interest to do this. Are you doing this because you're a faculty member or teacher and you're interested in it? Like one of the reasons we started at UNCW is because I'm a huge League of Legends player and I wanted to be able to have people to play with. That's one of the reasons we started. Or is this coming from like senior people? They've heard that you can make a lot of money or something good about esports and hey, faculty member or teacher, you need to start a program in esports. Is that where this is coming from? Because the first thing I will tell you, do not do this for money. Do not do this thinking that your school or you are going to like all of a sudden get these huge sponsors and all this money because you're starting an esports program. I repeat, do not do this for financial returns. The industry is too new. We don't really know where this is going in K-12 and collegiate. We don't know if there's going to be these huge financial returns at this point. But we do know if you're starting a program because you want to increase student engagement, retention, inclusion of students who are not currently included in your university or school. You want to give these students school spirit, potentially increase enrollment. Then these are all reasons why you start. These are the right reasons. That's why you want to start an esports program, right? To do that stuff. All right, now that we've cleared that up. All right, so we've talked about some of the reasons why people want to do this. Now let's start to get into some of the more specifics. All right, first thing, financial investment. What does that mean? Do you have $0? We had $0 when we first started. We had some support from my university. They could give us some money here or there for things that we needed. And it was actually really great and helpful. And they gave us some good stuff. But a lot of times I'm talking to a school that has nothing. And then I'll talk to a school that's like, we have all this money, we don't know where to begin. So it's like, I'm hearing these like vice versa things. So what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get sponsors, first of all? Do you think that you're going to create this program and get large sponsors? So one of the first things I tell people is that there are many different esports programs already out there. And in the next few years, every college or school is going to have one. So the chance of you like landing Microsoft or Dell or like, Red Bull or Nike as a sponsor is pretty low. They're not going to be too impressed that you just have a program and they're going to come and give you all this money. It doesn't really work like that. All those big names have already went to some of the bigger programs and they're not looking to go everywhere. Your best bet for sponsorship or donation type money is through local businesses in your area because they're more than willing to help out new programs. That's where your best bet for sponsor. So if you're thinking about sponsorship, think, what do we have locally? Because that's where that money's really going to come from. So that's what you're relying on. Make sure it's. And the other thing I will talk about is like you hear these words thrown around in esports, especially in collegiate. I hear it a lot. The words partnership and sponsorship a lot. And those mean a lot of different things. And this happens in every industry actually as well. But those mean a lot of different things. Like partnership can mean like you're sharing revenue. They could mean like they paid for your arena. They could also mean like they gave you guys some free t-shirts and say we're partners, or like some mouse pads and say we're partners. So what do those words mean? You know, just because you see like someone's a partner with 10 places doesn't actually mean anything unless like you find out what that really means, because it could be huge or it could be absolutely nothing. So don't, you know, I find people like try to, there's like this, I'm impressed by who you're partnered with, but like that's not too meaningful until you break it down and find out like what's the context around that. And then it can be super impressive, or, you know, they gave you some free mouse pads. That's pretty cool. We had a bunch of companies give us a bunch of free little stuff like that, some freebies. So think about that. But other ways to get money for, you know, that financial, if your school's just not giving you money, donations are great. Like donations from the community and those local businesses, as I said, great, and fundraisers. Those are the best ways for you to locally find money. Now, the other question I have for you then around finance, you know, if you're talking about like, we'll get to like paying for like rooms and stuff like that, but like, are you offering scholarships? Now at the high school level, that's not happening yet, but at the collegiate level, it's happening. So are you offering scholarships? And I want to get into why that's actually important. All right. Next thing is senior staff buy-in and kind of where esports is housed. Like, where do you put this at a university or a school? Where does it fit? All right. So how do you get, you know, your principal, your university president, whoever it happens to be, how do you get their buy-in? So the first thing you need is you need a champion. That if you're watching this video, that champion for esports is probably you. What I find at most schools is there's like one person that's like really, really, really interested in esports or gaming, or they just happen to be like the tech person and they kind of have to do it. But they're kind of the champion. They're the person that's going to put it all together, right? So how do you get your senior people to do that? You have to show them the research and you have to show them statistics. Go back and look at some of my other videos where I have some of the gaming research, and you can see like what esports is doing, and that engagement, inclusion, retention, school spirit, that kind of stuff, even learning, like GPA and stuff of students who play video games and are involved in, you know, extracurricular activities like esports are increased. Take a look at that research, present them that research, also show them how it's a growing industry. But you have to get your senior leadership on board. At least someone at the high level has to be on board with what you're doing. But you also need a champion, and that's probably you if you're watching this. Okay, so where does esports fit? Oh man, I see this all the time. You know, does it belong like with athletics? Is it a sport? Does it belong in like a college of business, a college of computer science, communication, educate? Like, where does this belong? The truth of the matter is it's different for every single school that I see. I see it everywhere. I see it sometimes in athletics. I see it sometimes. I'm in a instructional technology program in a college of ed. That's where it is here. And that's the case in some other programs. I see it as its own separate thing. You know, people ask, is esports a sport? I say no. Esports is esports. It's its own separate entity. It has tons of similarities to sports, but it's its own separate thing. It's not a sport, it's an esport. Right? All right. Okay. So that's kind of, it fits where it's going to fit for your school. There's no right answer to this. It fits where it's going to fit. It's literally different in every school. All right. Are you going to hire staff for your esports program, whatever that means? If you want a team, you have to hire staff. I mean, if you want a good, successful team, you have to hire staff. You want an arena? You got to hire staff. Or a lab, you got to hire staff. You want curriculum? You got to hire staff. What staff do you need? Well, that depends on your goals. Let's get into some of those goals about some of the different stuff like clubs and stuff. But to be honest, if you're trying to do any of this successfully, have a good program that's going to compete with any other school or university, who are you hiring to do this? Because it is a full-time job. That might be you. They might say, you know, part of your job is teaching the sports classes or whatever, and that's fine. But it's can't be an addition to all the other stuff you're doing. It needs to be, okay, instead of you doing these 5 things over here, now you're doing these 5 things. That's how it has to work. There has to be people working on this or it will not get done. All right, so let's talk about the first way that most programs start up, and that's generally through a club. That's how we started at UNCW. We started as a club, and most places start as a club. And most places that I find start in bare bones club, like you have nothing. You start as a student organization, right? Or an after-school activity. Your students have their own computers or machines. You probably don't have any, or maybe you're like, sharing a computer lab, which is what we were doing. We are doing well in COVID times. But that's what you're doing. You're just using resources, existing resources that you already have. Coach is probably you. You don't really have a coach. You haven't hired imagine like football, just saying like science teacher, you're going to coach the football team. I mean, that happens, but like that's really what you're seeing in esports too. Most schools do not have a dedicated coach. If they don't, they're not in those top competitive schools winning the big tournaments either. So right now, my players, for example, we have to pay, and my players themselves are paying for an external coach, but there has to be a coach. All right. So that's club. My suggestion for you, if you are starting a club, just starting it up, is to make sure that you have student interest in starting the club, first of all. And B, make sure that it's a gaming and esports club. Even though you in your head, like when I say esports, I'm really talking about the gaming industry in general. But to some kids, they think like, oh, I'm not, that can be a little scary to them. And they might think that you're really only talking about the competitive nature of gaming and not just you're trying to, include everyone. Like maybe, especially if it's a club, like you're really trying to get like students interested in Minecraft and everything else, getting them all together. So make sure it's very clear. Like we are called the Esports and Gaming Club. We started out with just the name esports, but realized, lesson learned, that some students didn't feel included. So we changed it to gaming. And the other thing when I say about like make sure you have student interest, like without your student support, without their involvement in this whole process, this will fail. You have to do this for students. What do they like? What do they want? All right. Okay, so that's club stuff. Let's get the room. Room, man, this is a big one. Are you building like an arena or a stadium, or do you just have a computer lab, or do you have nothing? We first dealt with this at UNCW, and what we've come up with now, what we have a shared space, a shared technology lab, which is mostly used by the esports students. I will, however, say in times of COVID, we are all virtual, so that doesn't even help us too much. But okay. Computer lab and room, and I built this lab, so I can talk about the finances behind it and all the things that you have to plan. But when you're building an esports lab, you have to think about so many things that you don't think about with a normal computer lab. So you're talking about competition. So it's like someone saying the difference between you building like a football stadium that's going to be used by a college football team versus like the pickup college people. Everything has to be exact. You have to have all the right equipment or it won't function. So let's talk about it. You got to decide what kind of computers, consoles, or technology you have based on what your students are playing. How many computers and stuff do you need? Well, that depends on what kind of teams you're building and stuff like that. But the big things that you have to think about are like, what are all the other stuff we're doing? Do we need cameras? Do we need microphones? What kind of chairs, like good ergonomic chairs, are we going to purchase? What kind of desks are we going to? What makes this setup, in addition to just being a computer lab, what makes this setup ideal for esports? So like, do we have a dedicated internet connection? If we plan to be the best, and number one, we need a dedicated internet connection in this room. The room has to be cool because most computer labs are cool for a reason. So you got to start to think about like all this planning if this is going to be on video, are we going to have special kind of lighting? Or where are we going to have our banners? Where are we going to have, so the price starts going up significantly. Like I can price out 5 machines for you really quick and say, yeah, in general, like a workstation costs like $2,500. But now we're talking about lighting and air conditioning and dedicated internet and all this extra stuff that you got to think about. That's obviously if you want to be best. I've seen schools start with literally no room, or just a room they can use for 2 hours a week that has nothing in it, that's just blank. So you can start with nothing, or you can start with everything, but you got to figure out what your budget is and how you're going to work with that. All right, next thing, teams. So my recommendation for you for teams is, first of all, don't just say, hey, we're going to start a League of Legends team. I kind of did that when we first started, but I had students interested in it, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But I've realized that what you need to do is you need to ask the students, what games do you guys all play, and what games do you want to be competitive in? I can't just say we're going to do League of Legends and Call of Duty. It doesn't work like that. Nope. I got to see what they're actually interested in and then pick my games based on that. Next thing, if I'm going to have teams, I've got to have a coach. It can't just be me administering the teams, because that's one part of it. I got to check their GPA, make sure the students are doing well, make sure they're showing up, all that good stuff. But I need someone who can coach the students on League of Legends strategy, on CSGO strategy, on Smash strategy. That's when I'm talking about coaching, that strategy portion. You can get that online or whatever, but you have to pay for it. It's not free. You're not just going to get a free coach. So if you want a team and you want them to be actually competitive and if you're just doing it for fun, fine, I get that. But if you want to be competitive and be the best, just know that every other school you're competing against, they have dedicated coaches that are coaching those kids to perform really well. So you're probably not going to beat them if you don't have that, if you're not at that level as well. So think about that. And then which tournaments should you enter is the next question I get quite often. And the tournaments should match the games and schedule that you have put together. Don't just say we're going to enter this tournament and then you find out none of your students play any of those games. No, say, well, here's the games we have. What tournaments are available for us that offer those games, and how much do they cost, and do they cost anything? They might be free, and what kind of time commitment is it? All right, so that's how you put that together. Okay, next thing, curriculum. Putting together esports curriculum is not a super easy task because I've done it. And I did it 2 years ago when there was literally like less than a handful of programs out there. So I had nothing to really go off of. Now you have a lot more to go off of, but the research is still brand new. And we're still learning about this industry. It's still a very young industry when you compare it to other industries. You have to think about that when you're building a curriculum. So my advice to you if you're building a curriculum is make sure that whoever's building the curriculum understands and is involved in the industry in some way, or that your SME or subject matter expert is involved. We had myself, I was competitive in Halo in the 2000s, and then I've been competitive in League of Legends for the last 10 years. And I've been keeping up with everything happening in the industry since the late 90s. Then we had a professional team helping us put together our curriculum. I had my students helping us, not just my students who are interested in esports. I had students who had worked as a tournament organizer before helping me put together this curriculum. And then I had all the research and all the other stuff you could find out there to build it. So, we did a lot of thinking about how to build an esports curriculum and what that means and what that looks like. So if you're looking to build a curriculum, know that it's not an easy task and you really need people in the industry, involved in the industry to help you do that. All right. And then there's a question of should you have do you need a degree in esports? Should you have a master's certificate, bachelor's degree, minor, all that kind of stuff? And that's kind of up to your university. I don't want to get into that topic right now. And I've done it in other videos where I've talked about that. What we chose at UNCW, what made most sense for us was a certificate program that would give students the knowledge of the industry, the knowledge of esports, a portfolio that they build. Basically, they build an assignment in each course, so they have something to show. And then an internship experience. So whatever their interest within the industry, if they're interested in streaming or whatever, they'd have an internship in that. So they would have some work experience, portfolio, and a few classes on the topic. So they would be able to, helpfully with their other major, actually go out, and it's more like a concentration. So that's how we saw it at UNCW, but there's no right or wrong answer there. I've seen other very successful programs with full degrees, full masters, MBAs, all kinds of stuff. As I said, it's a new industry, so we really just don't know what it's going to look like in 10 years, what the successful thing is going to be. Okay, next thing to think about if you're building an esports program, tournaments. And I don't mean your team's playing tournaments. Now I'm talking about internal tournaments, because there's two facets to starting an esports, esports at your university or school. There's the teams, the competitive teams that are going out and playing. But then there's the internal side, and that's the student is interested in gaming, and you're going to have game nights, you're going to have internal tournaments, and choosing the games and setup, and there's so much that goes into internal tournaments. I created a whole video on creating your own, esports, internal tournament where we use Smash Brothers and all the stuff you need to consider. So go watch that video if you're interested in hosting your own internal tournament and all the stuff you need to do, because that is a whole other process in of itself. And finally, my last big point is social media. Think about what social media you and your organization want to have and create it And a lot of people think like, well, I need Twitter, I need Instagram, I need YouTube, I need Facebook, we need a Twitch page to stream everything, we need 10 things. And then what happens, and we are totally guilty of this ourselves, is that you end up using like one of them, if that, and it ends up going pretty, not used for months. So be careful of that. And that's one of the reasons why, if you're starting this up, you really need dedicated staff to do this. Like we have a, just what we have at UNCW, we have a club, and we have probably maybe 11 to 13 club officers. And us getting stuff done, it's very difficult to ask volunteers who are students to do a lot of stuff. Having dedicated staff helps significantly because it's part of someone's job, what they're being paid to do, what they're being assessed on. So those are the big things to think about as you're starting up an esports program. These are the things that I talk to. I've had probably 40 conversations in the last year alone with different schools, colleges and high schools, putting together programs, all the stuff they need to do. Contact your other local schools. Think about what you guys are really putting together, what you're building, plan it out. Think about the financial resources you have. And most schools have no financial resources. They're putting this together the best they can. But you need to make that clear to your senior people that, hey, it is pay to play here. You want to be the best. You want to have a winning team. You want to stand out. You want to be the best college in esports. It costs money to do that. And it can cost a lot of money. So yes, every school is going to have an esports program. So us starting it now, yes, you might be a little early, but at this point, most schools have something going on. So, don't do it with that big financial, like chasing the carrot, because it doesn't work like that. It will help with certain things at your university or school, though, engagement, retention, all that kind of stuff. It really does help with that. The effects are immediate. That it can help with that kind of stuff. The financial thing, way far away. We're still just too early of an industry to know where that's going to be. So think about all that stuff as you're planning out your program. I know I covered a lot of stuff here. I wrote myself like a bunch of notes before I created this video and said like, these are the big things, constant like lessons learned, things that I am asked about consistently as programs are put together and that I keep getting asked. So I just wanted to kind of go through and get it all out there so that when you're thinking about starting your program, I can just send you to this video and then say, what questions do you have for me now, to talk specifically about your program. But go ahead, post your questions down below and let me know what you think, or anything that helped you start your program, or anything that you have a question on, and I'll be sure to help you out in the best way that I can. All right, later all.